Hey, welcome back to the HBCU Stroll with yours truly, Johnny JC. Some people call me Football Cole. Today I got a great guest, been knowing a long time. He actually brought football, HBCU football, into my house. First time I've ever heard and seen black college football was him broadcasting Grambling State. Also, one of my other favorites is Doug Williams, who also helped me with my choice of going to school. For decades, his name is Charlie Neal, has been the voice of football for his historically black colleges and universities, an NBA studio host, and one of the architects of modern sports media. He deserved to be better known and celebrated. Let's start now with my special guest, Mr. Charlie Neal. Hey,
Johnny,
Coach, how you doing?
I'm great, Johnny. How are you? It's great seeing you. It's been a while.
Man, it's been a while, Coach, and I'm gonna call you Coach because you know more football probably than anybody. You've seen greatness, Charlie, you started back and really came out front back in 1980 when you started hosting Black college football on BET.
Yeah, yeah. 1980 BET started. The great story is Bob Johnson, who founded BET, contacted me. I was working at a station in Detroit, Michigan. Bob called me, and I didn't know Bob from the Man in the Moon. And of course, someone gave him my name, and he said to me, this was like May or June of 1980. He said, I would like to start a black network, Black Entertainment Television. And one of the things I want to do with this network is concentrate, or not necessarily totally concentrate, but include black college sports. And your name came up and it was recommended to me as a person who could help me do that. And wanted to know what I thought and if we could meet. And we did. Like I said, I was working in Detroit at the time. He was living in Washington, D.C. I drove over to Chicago and met him at O'Hare Airport. He flew in from D.C. We sat down and we spent a whole day together. And I believed in what he was doing. And I told him, I said, I've seen other people try to go into this venture and make it work. It hasn't worked, but I think it's a place for it, and it's needed, much needed. And I'm happy, more than happy, to jump on that bandwagon. And that's where it all started in 1980. And in fact, like I said, we had that meeting in Chicago O'Hare Airport, like in the spring or summer of 1980. In September, we kicked off the football season, believe it or not. But our first game, it was Delaware State at home against South Carolina State. And that's where it all started in 1980.
Well, Coach, I talk about HBCU football and all of our stars and heroes, and certainly you are one and one at the top. One would ask that you've been around over 50 years of broadcasting. But the thing that I loved about you is and I'm not going to say, I might use the wrong word of turning your back on HBCU. You believed it, you spoke it. Why did you not ever go over to the mainstream of broadcasting sports?
Well, I've done both. I've done both because I was working in regular television, local television. I worked for CBS. I worked for Turner. I worked for the other networks. But I also always kept my ear and my feet to the grindstone when it came to BET and HBCU sports. As I said, when I started with BET, I was working at a TV station in Detroit. I eventually, a couple of years later, moved to New York. I was working for CBS Sports and BET at the same time. And then in 1984, I went to work for Turner down in Atlanta, doing the NBA and a number of other events and sports for them. But I also still did BET. In fact, doing basketball season, it was kind of crazy. I was relaying my schedule the other day to someone. Doing the NBA season, I would fly to Atlanta on Tuesday because I was doing what Ernie Johnson does now. And I would fly to Atlanta, host the NBA pregame and halftime show, and then fly home Wednesday, get back on a plane, fly back to Atlanta on Friday. And I was living in Washington, D.C., fly back to Atlanta on Friday, do the show Friday, then Saturday go do a BET game, fly back to Atlanta on Sunday, and do the core sports page, and then fly home on Monday, and we start that whole cycle all over again. And that went on from October to like May. That was crazy. Yeah.
See, one thing I want the people to know, that one thing that you known for is during COVID, when everybody was canceling games and everything. One of the HBCU schools, what was it, Delaware State, women's and Morgan State women's basketball team. Man, you went out there and broadcast the game anyway.
Well, I don't think I had much of a choice, but here's what happened, Johnny. Of course, as you said, the NCAA started canceling events and the conferences started canceling events. I happened to be in Norfolk doing the MEAC basketball tournament. And the day, I believe it was a Thursday, I'm almost sure it was a Thursday, we had the noon game. I believe it was the noon game on that I was broadcasting. And there was debate at halftime or just before the game started whether it was going to happen again. And everybody else had canceled. Across the country had canceled everything. Nobody else was on the air. And we were the last ones to broadcast. I think it may have been a 3 o'clock when we actually signed off. But we did the last actual game that was broadcast that year before COVID on any network, any sport, before everything was canceled because of COVID. But it was Delaware State and Morgan State. Not long ago, I had lunch with Ed Davis, who's the coach at Morgan State, and he was coaching at that time. And we were kind of laughing and talking about that event going back to that year when COVID just set the world up, turned the world upside down.
Well, you know, Batman has Robin and Superman has Lois Lane. Where your man Lim Barney at? You know, I'll be waiting on that for the Black College game going, and then both of y'all go at it. Y'all work great together.
We had a great time together. You know, it's kind of interesting how Lim and I partnered up. When Bob came to me about doing these games, he asked me who I would like to work with as a partner. He had selected Roy Jefferson, who had played with the Washington Redskins at the time. That was a person that he knew. And he asked me who I felt I could work with. Well, I had been in Detroit. I had worked in Detroit, and I had broadcast a number of Detroit Lions preseason games. I used to do their preseason games, and then I covered them throughout the season. And I was there when Lim was playing. And after he retired, knowing he went to Jackson State, I said, hey, this is a great a person and a marriage to bring someone who played in HBCU, played in the NFL, was an all-pro, you know, eventually went into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but, you know, was an all-pro. Why not bring him on board? We worked together for 23 years. And I think we had the longest serving, if not maybe the second longest serving team other than Madden and Summerall in terms of longevity, the same two people working together. And Lim Barney was a great partner, had a great time together, some great stories, some I can't tell on the air, but we had some fun times together. Lim, health-wise, not doing fantastic right now, living down in Houston with his daughter and you know, every now and then we get a chance to talk to him and kind of keep up with him and his health and hope he continues to improve.
Well, I'm gonna put Lim in my prayer because the influence that you guys put on me, just me personally, and it took me 30 years for me to hear your voice or to talk to you before a game in a championship game. You know, of course, when we won the championship in 2010 in Montgomery, I was more happy to see you and be a part of that. I just want to share that with you. You know, you know, that was just, you know, that was the caveat on winning the championship game, getting interviewed by you.
Well, it was so interesting because I see people now that I've done. Quinn Gray, I mean, some of he just got the job at Albany State. I mean, there's so many former players that are out there that I had a chance to do their games when they were playing. Some of them have risen to be head coaches now, or they're doing whatever they're doing in their careers, not necessarily even coaching. Just a couple of weeks ago, I'm down in Canton, Ohio, for the Pro Football Hall of Fame induction ceremony. And Ken Riley, who was a great athlete, a great friend, a member of the Black College Football Hall of Fame, and they inducted him finally after 40 years into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, 65 career interceptions. But the most gratifying thing of that weekend for me, not only was him going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but his son, Ken Riley II, getting a chance to spend some time with him and interview him. And he played for his dad at Florida A&M. And he is now, a fantastic young man. Had a chance, like I said, to spend some time with him. And he came back and relived some games that I did when he was playing. So, now here's the thing, Johnny, that makes you really feel old, is when you've done a game, for example, let's say if you were playing, and then a few years later, I'm doing your son's games. And then a few years later, I'm doing his kids' games. So, you've been around a while when you start going through 3 generations.
Yeah, I had the pleasure, too, of coming up during your ceremony when you got inducted into the Black College Hall of Fame. Talk about that and what that means to you. And it means a lot to me. And I'm pretty sure, like you talked about other players that you've done, it was long overdue.
Well, it was much appreciated. It was very humbling. And, in addition to the Black College Football Hall of Fame, CIAA, and the MEAC Hall of Fame, and that as saying that people have thought that I did something and brought something to the sport, to be recognized like that. There's only 111 people in it. This is the 11th year for the Black College Football Hall of Fame. And only 111 people have gone in. And I would say out of those 111 people that have been inducted into the Black College Football Hall of Fame, around 90 to 95 of them were former players. So I'm not going in as a player. I'm going in as a contributor. And that means a whole heck of a lot. If you can go into an organization like that, into the Black College Football Hall of Fame as a contributor, that means you contributed something that people who brought you in or voted me in thought that I contributed greatly to the sport.
Yeah. One thing about me, I'm a history buff, HBCU buff, and just African American athletic buff. And man, you've been around, Coach. You've seen it, you've done it, you've been right there in the trenches. Just I want to talk about just the racial difference in the game. I mean, you were around in the 60s and 70s and watched some great players, but coaches never been able to move. Can you elaborate and talk about that? We've had some great ones. Rudy down at, you talked about Ken Riley. You talked about Pete Rich. Well, we're going to talk about Pete Richardson.
Right.
And all those great coaches that came through that never got that opportunity to go to the next level.
I think the closest that anyone ever came was Eddie Robinson, possibly going to coach. And that is something, as you said, Johnny, that we haven't seen, we don't see, even with the great successes that they've had. We've had some, of course, we know Hugh Jackson now is coaching at Grambling, but he comes over from the pro side and comes to an HBCU. Started out at Tennessee State with Eddie George, and now he's moved over, and then his second year at Grambling. But the one thing that I'm very elated about is seeing is the number of former players who are coaching now at the HBCU level. And I mentioned Eddie George, and I mentioned there's Eddie Robinson Jr. over at Alabama State, coach at Prairie View. I mean, these are guys who've played professional football, and they're giving something back and had a chance and have coached at various levels and have been able to coach at the pro level. But
Right.
again, going back to what you were saying, when you look back at the John Merritts at Tennessee State, and you look
Oh
back
wow.
at the Marino Castlems and
W.C. Gordon.
W.C. Gordon and Houston
Yeah.
Markhams, and
Yeah.
some of the great names that have come through. Uh, uh, the coach from Morgan State, Earl
Yeah.
Banks. I mean,
Right.
those names are synonymous with HBCU success, not
Yeah.
just football, but
Right.
HBCU football success. And there's Doug Porter, who's still, he's been a candidate the last couple of years for the Black College Football Hall of Fame. Coached at Fort Valley, was a longtime assistant to Eddie Robinson. Coached at Howard University. I mean, there were some great coaches out there. The opportunities just were not there because
Right.
you have to think. This is why the Rooney Rule comes along. Paul Tagliabue, when he was the commissioner of the NFL, pushed to have more minorities represented in the coaching ranks. And you've got that Rooney Rule. I don't know if it really works, because we know, there's the quote unquote. We'll bring them in for an interview, but
Right.
the chances of you
Right.
getting the job, why isn't Eric Bieniemy a head coach? Why aren't some of the other coordinators? Why is Leslie Frazier not coaching? I
Right.
mean, people like that. So those are the things that you have to think about, because again, until we get in position to make those decisions as owners, it's still going to
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
status quo,
Yeah.
unless you get a person like that brought Art Shell in and
Yeah.
made him the first modern day African American head coach with the
Right.
Oakland Raiders,
Right.
Al Davis. Unless how many owners have that progressive type thinking? And that's
Right.
the thing that you have to think about. I mean, we know that the in Pittsburgh, hey, Mike Tomlin has done a
Yeah.
fantastic job,
Right.
and it's the longest serving African American coach in the NFL as far as the head
Right.
coach is concerned.
Right.
So, the chances are, and this is the I guess the sad part of in some of it is when given that opportunity, a lot of times they give you, it's a team that has a slim chance and none of doing anything. I mean,
Yeah.
look how many coaches has Houston had in the last few years? You
Oh
know,
man.
you just look at that as and a few of them, have been African Americans. But
Right.
again, they
But
have not.
they only had 1 year though.
That's exactly it.
Lovey Smith had 1 year.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so again, there's some coaches out there and I do give the NFL a little credit. They have these programs now where each year or each team brings in a coach from an HBCU doing training camp to work
Mhm.
with them to give them an idea of what it's like to be at that level. And so
Mhm.
that is a step in the right direction. But the big step has not been taken.
Right.
That's
Right.
the unfortunate part.
Right. I and that's true. And I try to use my show for a base on the college level. Of course, they not definitely not giving us the opportunity in the NBA, but we're not getting the opportunities in the NCAA level. When you got 95% of colleges in the country that their athletic directors are Caucasian, and people tend to hire who looks like them, you know,
Well, yeah,
and I
I
think
mean,
that's kind of hurting us as well.
it's a comfort level. You more familiar with people like you said that you can relate to, and a lot of times, even when we get in those positions, we try to show we're not going to be that way. We go the opposite way. So we
Right,
can't always.
right,
You're in a no-win situation.
right, right. And of course, looking at all the success you've had, one would think that those type of things have happened to you because, coach, you good. I mean, when you open your mouth, man, everybody's eyes go to that screen. But in your case, it might have been a choice not to really say, okay, well, I'm just gonna go straight NFL and shy away from college and HBC. Have you experienced some of those things?
Well, here's what. Now, I've been very fortunate, Johnny. A lot of the things that's happened with me, And I've had those opportunities. First of all, let me just go back. And I was saying, before BET came along, I was working in local television, and I worked in major markets. I worked in Washington, D.C. I worked in Philadelphia. I worked in Detroit. I worked in New York. Local news and doing sports at those stations, doing games. I did Big Ten games when I was in Detroit. I did Michigan. I did covered the Lions. I mean, I was doing those things. I go to New York. I'm working for CBS Sports. In addition to BET, I was working for CBS Sports. When Turner was getting, they called me. One of the producers that I'd worked with at CBS became one of the executive producers down at Turner in Atlanta. He called me, brought me down to Atlanta to do, like I said, the core sports page, the NBA. I wound up doing the Goodwill games. I was with Dr. Leroy Walker in Moscow in 1986. I was the lead announcer for track and field and gymnastics. Wow. So, I've had those opportunities. In fact, they tried to get me to come full time and move to Atlanta. I just didn't want to move to Atlanta. I stayed with BET, to keep from moving to Atlanta. I just had no desire to move down there. I was living in Washington, D.C. And so the opportunities that presented themselves. When BET stopped doing sports back in the early 2000s, like 2005, 2004, ESPNU was born. I did the first ever game on ESPNU. Right. So that was in 2005. And ironically, it was an HBCU game, but it was on one of the ESPN family of networks, and it was Benedict and Morehouse. Right. J.D. Washington, which is Denzel Washington's son, was the running back for Morehouse at that time. So again, the opportunities have been there for me. I don't have any regrets, to be honest with you. Yeah, you can always say, sure, I would like to have been able to call a Super Bowl, or like to been able to call the NBA championship game and things of this nature. But let me say this: I have no regrets. I've been blessed. I have been fortunate, and I have been able to do things, see things, travel places, meet people that some people can't even dream of doing.
Yeah. Well, one would ask, now that these new people are seeing Jay Skywalker, you kind of gave him the baton, which is beautiful, and
I helped recruiting.
You helped recruiting. I'm still a Charlie Neal fan though, but Jay is doing a super job.
Well, he is. Yeah, let me say this: I helped recruit Jay. Jay was at Long Beach State, and Long Beach State was coached by former Redskins coach. I can't think of his name right now. Anyway. They dropped football.
Not Joe Gibbs.
Okay. Before him.
Okay.
But anyway, it'll come to me in a minute. Jay was playing at Long Beach State. They dropped football. My cousin, who happened to be Steve Wilson, who played with the Denver Broncos, he's my cousin. His grandmother and my mother are sisters. Okay? So Steve was the head coach at Howard. Yes. Steve was recruiting Jay Walker to come to Howard, and he brought him to DC. He came in and he brought him to BET. He spent a day over at BET with me, and I think that's what convinced him. Some of those ladies walking the hall at the time at BET, that kind of, plus Howard University's campus is it's hard not to. It's got great eye candy there also.
Right.
So Jay wound up coming to Howard, had a great career in the 2 years that he was there. Mm-hmm. And then he partnered with me on games. When he started his broadcasting career, he partnered. I had Eddie Robinson Jr. and I had Jay Walker, So they worked with me on ESPNU, on the HBCU telecast. And Jay is, he's been there. This is 2023. He's been there at least, I think he started in 2006, maybe 2007. So he's been there 17 years with them and doing a great job. Him and Tiffany Green, they partner up doing the season for ESPN.
Yeah, he broadcast a couple of my games when I was at Lane College, when we played Morehouse in Atlanta.
Sure.
Man, all the great things, man, those names still pop up to you. of course we can't go without talking about the HBCU TV Go TV. I watch it every night, because I keep my mind fresh on what's going on, the new things in offense, new things going on defense. Let's talk about the HBCU Go TV.
Well, the HBC, it's ironic. Curtis Simons, who's a product of ESPN, he spent 8 years at ESPN, came over from there to BET, was an executive vice president of marketing with Black Entertainment Television, and then left BET. And he had, ever since he left BET and BET stopped doing sports, his vision was to bring back Black college sports. And, he preached this day in. Every time I talk to him, we're going to make this happen. We're going to make this happen. We're going to make this happen. And finally, and he was doing some things, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And he hooked up with Byron Allen, with the Allen Media Group. And Byron Allen said, hey, let's partner. Let's get this thing going. Let's put HBCU Go on the map. And last year, we kicked off our inaugural football season with 12 games. We did from there, we went into basketball. We did 61 basketball games. Wow. So we had one whale of a year, 2022, and going into 2023. And now with 2023, we're upping our game in football this year. We will do 23 football games this season. Okay. We will have doubleheaders starting Labor Day weekend. We'll have doubleheader every Saturday, going, right through November 11th will be the last day of the doubleheader, and we'll close out our season on November 18th with a Prairie View, I believe, at Texas Southern, or vice versa. I'm not sure. Right. But it's Prairie View and Texas Southern playing at the end of no, it won't be Prairie View and Texas Southern. It can't be, because they play at the beginning of the year. Yeah. So I'm just looking here.
Is it Grambling Southern? Oh, well, it ain't Grambling Southern.
Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and Texas Southern. That's where we close out the season with football on that day. But then on the 17th, that's the 18th of November. But the 17th of November, we're in Atlanta doing a college tournament, basketball tournament, featuring there'll be 8 HBCU teams playing. We will broadcast 2 of those games on that Friday night. We'll have our football game on Saturday. Then Monday, we go to Tallahassee, Florida for FAMU, and the SWAC has a deal with the Pac-12. And I believe it's Oregon women playing FAMU's women and Cal's men playing FAMU's men. And that'll be on that Monday, the 20th. And we go right through November, December, right into the conference schedule, right into March. So we're looking, to do some great things. You thought that we had some great looks from a year ago in football. Wait till you see some of the things we're going to incorporate in our telecast this year. It's going to be, we're going to stepping it up. We're stepping up our game.
Oh, hey, look, if you're involved, I know it. I've heard about. Now, did you guys do the Hard Knocks with Central State University? Was it this summer or this fall?
We did not do that. There was talk about doing a show similar to that. We did not, because there were so many other things we were trying to do. But what we do have will air on the 26th, which is a Saturday, the 26th of August at noon Eastern. Your time is 3-hour difference. Am I correct? Yes, in Phoenix? Yes. Okay. So it'll be 9:00 in the morning. We will have a 3-hour preseason kickoff show that I'm hosting. I'm hosting that show, and it's got a lot of stuff in it for 3 hours. But for 3 hours, you'll be sitting on the edge of your seat. And we go to the Black College Football Hall of Fame. We're at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We're interviewing everybody. We're interviewing all the coaches from the different conferences. We're featuring all 4 conferences: the MEAC, CIAA, SIC, and the SWAC. We're at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That's where our show will originate from. We taped it they're finishing it up now, but we finished it up a little over a week ago.
Wow, I was born too early.
Yeah.
I like that. That's what it's about. You know, one of the things, Charlie, and of course, I want you to comment on. One of the things I always thought in my mind that we do have a different brand of football. Our field is 100 yards long and 53 yards wide, but the pageantry around it, the style around black college football. Why can't we do like the SEC and these big conferences getting these TV packages on taking all of our classic games, just the classic, because we know it's going to be 40, 50, 60,000 fans, and packaging that and being able to sell it. And I ain't talking about for no 2 and 3 and $10 million. I'm talking about getting some money like they got getting money. What's your thoughts?
Well, again, you have a number of classic that's been there for a while. The Bayou Classic. We're doing the Southern Heritage Classic down in Memphis this year with Tennessee State. Of course, Jackson State is not going to play in it this year to be Arkansas Pine Bluff. The Magic City Classic between Alabama State and Alabama A&M. You have the Florida Classic, Bethune and Florida A&M. Those classics, they still draw well. What we have tried to do, in addition to some of the classics, because we open up with the Chicago Classic in Chicago, Illinois on Labor Day weekend. That's our first of the 2 doubleheader games that we're doing on that weekend. We have 5 homecoming games on our schedule. So, sometimes, classics are great, but we have 5 homecoming games, and those, people come to homecoming. And so they're going to come and they're going to tailgate and they're going to do the things. And we're looking at doing some things going forward. Next year, there's a big game in New York going on between Grambling and Hampton. We're looking to maybe to piggyback on that a year from now. There's a group that's talking about putting on a postseason type of bowl game, possibly. Next year. They were talking about it this year, but things weren't working out. And, we would be on the ground floor of being involved in that. People are coming up with more and more of these games. Plus, again, one of the things with HBCU Go, just so some people will ask, well, why aren't you doing this game or why aren't you doing that game? A lot of these conferences before HBCU Go became viable had signed contracts with ESPN. And so ESPN still has the right to cherry pick and be right of first refusal on some of the games. So we have to sit back and wait until they pick some of the games. Now, we're not very happy with some of the things ESPN has done, because last year we did not have a Jackson State game. And Deion, we did not have a Jackson State game. We had everybody else. But we didn't have Jackson State. Well, this year they tried to block us even more because we still don't have a Jackson State game this year, and we don't have a Southern game this year. Okay. Oh, wow. And we almost didn't have a FAMU game, but we did pick up a FAMU game. It's not a conference game. It's not a conference game for FAMU, but it's their first home game. And that'll be September 16th when they play West Florida. Now, West Florida, you may say, okay, West Florida. West Florida is a Division II program. This is only their 7th year of playing football. Out of the 6 previous seasons, they went to the Division II playoffs 4 times, and they won it in 2019. So, again, they're not playing any, the little sisters of the poor. So, Albany State gave them FAMU a tussle last year. We had that game in Tallahassee last year. This year we'll have FAMU playing West Florida. But again, I look at what we're going to put out there. People are going to really enjoy the product, both our syndicated game and our cable games, which James Hadnot and Antoine Bethea, former Indianapolis Colts defensive back and Howard University alum, is on that team, and they will be carrying the games. A lot of those games are SIAC and CIAA games. So it's going to be great. It's going to be a great season for HBCU Go and all the fans out there.
Yeah, I'm excited this year to be able to go to a channel where I could see more uh, more black college games. Uh, Tell me, Coach, how did you feel about the Dion Dion entering and Dion exit? You heard so many things. It was great. It was in between. It was in the middle. But before you talk, he ain't swag. I'm swag. He ain't swag.
Yeah, my buddy Eddie Robinson, he said he just wanted to play him one more time. They played Jackson State in Jackson this year. Of
They
course,
played him
Dion's
tough.
gone.
Yeah.
Dion's gone. Let me say this: I've known Dion since his playing days when he played with the Braves and when he's playing with the Falcons, and
Okay.
we've have a relationship, a good relationship, and have been for all those years. He's done a lot in terms of notoriety for historically black colleges and universities. He brought a lot of notoriety. A lot of people don't like the way he went about doing some things and how he did this and did that. And the only thing, if anything, I thought he could have when after he won the SWAC championship before he went to the regular season championship, he could have went to the press conference instead of jumping on a plane and going to Colorado. I mean, but that's a personal choice.
Right.
But I do not begrudge him the fact that, hey, if the opportunity comes, like you said, you owe me about being an HBCU guy. But let me say this: if the NFL Network comes to me tomorrow and opens the purse strings and offers
Right.
me $1 million,
Yeah. Yeah.
HBCU, it
Yeah.
was nice knowing you. You
Right.
know,
Right.
you know.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, it's no knock on HBCU Go. It's just you have to look out for yourself, and
Right.
because the opportunities, I've always told young people, opportunity when it knocks, you have to be able to open that door and take advantage of
Right.
it because it may not knock again.
Right.
So, and not because I have any ill feelings or hard feelings about HBCU Go, but again, everybody has to look out for themselves, and that's all Dion did.
Yeah.
He looked out for himself. He's making the kind of money he would never make at Jackson State. I don't care if he stayed there another
Right.
5 years.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, so
Oh, ain't no question he had to go. And not only for himself, to me, for an African American coach to be the coach in the Big 12, he had to go. To me, he
that's
had to service us. And I'm praying every night that he does well there. You know what I'm saying?
we want him to do well. We want him to do well, and a lot of people don't like the fact that he's flamboyant and this, that, and the other, and the way he went about doing things. But hey, if it works, if it's not broke, don't try to fix it. And that's what he's been able to do is to keep that aura going about himself and the mystique that he has, and people gravitate to that. They either love it or they hate it. But look at what he did with the spring ball in Colorado. I mean, they
Right.
sold out the
Right.
stadium. Season tickets
For-
off the
46,000 at
chart.
the spring game.
I'm just
Yeah.
yeah. See,
Yeah.
so those types of things they haven't seen up in Colorado in years.
Right.
So
Right.
again, let's hope that transcends into a winning tradition, winning seasons for Dion there, and then we'll see how long he stays there. Because
Yeah.
who knows? Does the NFL call him? I don't know if he wants to coach in the pros because I don't think he can have
Right.
that same type of attitude that he
With
has with kids
right.
when he is
Right.
with
Right.
grown men who are making millions of dollars. So those are the
Well,
things.
you can look at Nick Saban and Lou Holtz and those great coaches in college really flopped when they got to the pros. So I mean, you're
Yes.
absolutely right about that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Only thing if I said something about Dion was that don't forget the greats that came through there. And I don't think that he knew enough about the conference of the great coaches that have was the stuff that he was doing that already have been repeated over and over by the greats. Of course, Eddie and Marino Castle, L.C. Cole,
All right.
Comagese. Those
Yeah.
guys have done the same thing, telling the kids to sit in the front three seats and feet on flat on the ground and cut your hair. We go to church on Sunday and all the greats. So if there was anything that kind of deterred me a little bit was, it's like, oh, Black College just showed up because Dion is the savior of Black College, and
Yeah, right.
that was just false. That was just so
There were
false.
people there that put HBCUs on the map long before Dion Reeves was even thought about. So
He's
yeah, you're right.
born, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
you're right.
if that was, but I'm cheering him on. He actually took some Black College coaches with Black College backgrounds with him, with Flea going up there and the coach from Mississippi Valley.
Mississippi Valley, right?
All that I thought all that is great. It was great. So, Coach, what's next for Charlie Neal? Uh,
Well, getting ready for the season. We have weekly meetings as we get ready to move forward. Every Wednesday we have our production meeting, and in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, I guess it is, the Labor Day weekend, we'll be kicking it off, and then it's nonstop until probably May.
well,
you know,
one of
and
the things,
travel.
yeah, one of the things, Charlie, before you the fat lady sing, man, I want to have one of those opportunities to just sit with you during a game. But if a guy want to get in the business of broadcasting, and what kind of things that you would recommend, or did you go to school for it, or just
No,
some natural?
I actually started my broadcasting career as a disc jockey on radio.
Yeah.
I was playing records, spinning records, talking trash, rhyming. I was a big the Gita with the heater, the big boss with the big hot sauce, rocking a big TikTok on a big power tower. I was.
What was the big group that was coming out when you were with Brock?
You
DJ?
had the stylistics and the main
Oh, okay.
ingredient, and I mean back in the day,
Yeah,
Isley
yeah.
brothers were in their youth. Then the Commodores. I mean that was a lot of those the groups that the oldies but goodies.
Yeah, yeah. Temptations.
Temptations,
Yeah.
Billy Paul, me
Commodores.
and Mrs. Jones.
Commodores.
Commodore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I started my career in radio, and that was by accident.
Right.
Strictly, how I just a quick story. I had a buddy who was a disc jockey at a station in Philadelphia where I was born, named Scott Taylor, and he used to do a radio show in WHAT. And I used to go by the station and sit and watch him. And he said, you need to think about, if you'd like to do this. And I did. And I started, sitting in with him a little bit. And I got my first radio job full time in Durham, North Carolina at WSRC. And just happened, I was going to visit my cousin. I told you Steve was my cousin. I was going to visit the family down there in the summer. And this was 1969, 60. Yeah, I think it was 69. Yeah, it was summer of 1969. I'm going down to North Carolina, and I'm driving through, and I stopped by the radio station on a Saturday, and ironically, nobody's ever stationed on Saturday, and it was one car in the parking lot. I opened the door, went up, opened the door was open, and the program director, Irvin Hester, was there. And I happened to say to him, I said, "Are you looking for anybody to do, radio, DJ?" He said, "No, I'm not looking for anybody now." He said, but he went to the machine and pulled off some copy and said, "You read this, and we'll see what happens." It was like read some news copy. And so I didn't think any more about it. Like I said, this was like spring of that year, and I left. Went visited my cousins. Went on back home. In I think August or September, I get this phone call. I was out of town. My mom said, "You got a call from a guy named Irvin Hester down in North Carolina. He wants you to call him." I called him. He says, "I got a job for you down in Durham, North Carolina. If you're interested," he says, "Come on down. I'll pay you $100 a week."
Wow. Wow.
Oh
Wow.
yeah. And I looked at it this. I had a job. I was working, and I went to my boss and said, "Look, I'd like to take a leave of absence and try this out to see what happens." And I was making like twice, three times as much money at the time. Okay, but
Wow.
it was not about the money; it was about the opportunity. And he said to me, if you 6 months or 6 years from now, if you want to come back, you've got a job. But with that type of backing, how could I not take advantage of the situation? So I packed up my little U-Haul and down to Durham, North Carolina I went, uh, stayed there a year. And one of my best friend's brothers was the program director of a radio station in Washington, D.C., Ernie Fields. And Ernie and I knew each other, and he knew I was working in Durham. And he called me and said, "Look, I've got a job for you in Washington, D.C. I pay you $250 a week." And I said, "That sounds good. Let me talk to the boss here," which was Mr. Mays. He was the owner of the station, white gentleman in Durham. And I went up to him and I said, "I have this opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., but if you give me a $10 raise from 100 to 110, because I had a lot of things going on in Durham at the time. I was doing high school football on the radio. I was doing little record hops. I was doing stuff for this lady and her husband that owned a dress shop with some of the young ladies from North Carolina Central. And so I said, if you give me a $10 raise, I won't go to DC. I'll stay here." He patted me on the back. He says, "Young man, everybody who's left here has done well. I'm sure you will too." so, so I didn't get that $10 raise, but I did go to DC, and then I stayed there. I got there like in 70, and in the end of 70, Channel 4, which is the local NBC station in Washington, D.C., and they called me and they said, "We're specifically looking to hire an African American to do sports." They had three other sportscasters there, including Jim Simpson, who was one of the big time sportscasters for NBC.
Right.
And Jim, along with Dan Daniels and Maurice Siegel, they were the other sportscasters there. And he said, "Can you come over? We're doing an audition." Well, it was three blacks that they auditioned for that position. It was myself, Kurt Flood, the former baseball player, and Ron Pinkney, who had done some games, had done HBCU games and things like that. All three of us auditioned. I got the job. And that's where my TV exposure began. I still was doing radio, DJing. I would DJ Monday through Friday at the radio station at WOOK. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I was over at Channel 4 doing sports on the weekend.
Now, Charlie, did you play ball? What was
Football.
your so interest in sports? Did you
I played it, but never thought I was going to, be a broadcaster in it. Let me put it that way. I played it. I played baseball. I wasn't a basketball player, but I played baseball and football. And so, but I never thought I would be a broadcaster in the sport.
because you so much of a natural, especially now, of course, with all your experience. But when you first started out, um, did you hear those stories about sensational people like yourself get in the mirror and you're talking and you're practicing and you're working yourself because man, I just was hearing you the other night, and you be calling them. They throw a flag and you know more than the ref. Oh no, that flag wasn't holding. That was some down. Somebody he jumped off sides. I'm like, wow, Charlie really knows. He knows the game.
Well, I try to be a student of the game. Like I'll give you a perfect example. I've done a variety of sports over my career, including, as I mentioned, gymnastics at the Goodwill Games in Russia on a national platform. And the first time I was assigned to do gymnastics was when I was with CBS. And all I know, I'd seen gymnastics. I didn't know a balance beam from a high bar,
Right.
but I went to the library and I studied. And my position as a play-by-play announcer, I don't have to know all the intricacies of the game, of the nuts and bolts. I just have to give what is happening, how it's happening, and a story about the people who are participating.
Right.
I had Bart Connor and former Olympic gymnast as my an analyst who could tell me that was a 10 on that maneuver, or that was a 9.8, and that was a deduction. I wouldn't know it was a deduction if not, but they did. And I studied the basics that I needed to know about the balance bar, balance beam, how high it was, how wide it was, some of the disciplines that men do, women don't do in gymnastics. So you learn those things. You go in and you study those things. And then my mentor, and I mentioned Jim Simpson, who's bless his soul has passed away. But Jim Simpson, when I started at Channel 4, we didn't have teleprompters back then. It was no such thing. When the first time I had a teleprompter, I was like, I can't use that. I don't want that stuff running across in front of me trying to tell me what to read. I got used to knowing what I wanted to talk about. And Jim Simpson was the same way. He kind of was my inspiration in the way I went about broadcasting just the regular news or sports on a given night, and giving scores and things of this nature, and knowing how to lead into things. And so it helps you tremendously if you have that, because so many people nowadays depend on that teleprompter. Yeah. If the teleprompter ever goes down, or the teleprompter operator dies while you're in the middle of the show, you're in trouble, because people don't really prepare to work without that teleprompter anymore. They even, I see newscasters now, they go out on stories, they have a teleprompter. You can put it on your phone now. You can put a teleprompter on your phone, and you can do your stories out in the field with a teleprompter on your phone. So again, it's like anything, modern technology, things change. And then I left DC and went to work in Philadelphia with the Channel 6, which is an ABC station. And there was a guy there named Larry Kane, who was a newscaster. We didn't use teleprompters in Philadelphia. Larry Kane went through a whole newscast without the teleprompter. And you would think he had one sitting in front of him. So those are people who inspired me, in terms of my preparation and how I got ready to do things. And people always ask me, how much time do I spend preparing for a game? I probably spend anywhere, I'd say about 24 hours preparing for a game.
Right. Right. Well, I want to thank you and give you a chance. Thank you for the Celebration Bowl. You actually let me come by while y'all were going through, and I've seen the analysts passing you guys stuff about when somebody is breaking. That blew my mind, because I always wondered. I'm like, man, these guys are genius talking about the game, but really, they getting information passed to them. And I guess one of the biggest things is to make it smooth. Like, I did know that, and they let you know. So
I normally have my whole repertoire of things that I know I can talk about, and I've studied going into the game. The biggest thing I need during the course of a game is a stat person to tell me once a punt goes in the air. I don't have time to calculate and say that's a 47-yard punt and a 27-yard return. Right. So that person can give me that instantly. Right. So what he'll do is they'll write it down 47/22. So I know that's a 47-yard punt, 22-yard return. How long that return on a kickoff return, things of this nature.
Yeah. I'm coming down to the end now, with all the social media and the Facebooks and all that, and you got more Black broadcasters like yourself, or I don't want to call them analysts, like my man from Winston-Salem, Stephen A. Smith, and you got, you're kind of a pioneer to all those guys. And do you ever get a chance to meet them? And and how you feel about where media is today for African Americans?
Well, Stephen A. I know Stephen A. Smith. In fact, I was the MC when he was inducted into the CIAA Hall of Fame. James Brown, James Brown did games with me when he first started.
Wow.
Yeah, at CBS Sports. So, I've had, fortunately, played a part in a number of careers that people have. I didn't have anything to do with Stephen A. Smith's career, but I'm just saying there are people in the business that I know I played a part in their careers. And, I feel very fortunate that I was able to do that. And I'm glad that they have turned out to be the professionals that they are.
Right. Well, hey, Charlie, thank you. I know it don't took a whole year for me to get you. I got Obama before I got you. But you, to me,
right.
you that important. Man, you've always wrapped your arm around me. I thank you. I thank you for this interview. And I look forward to seeing you down the road. And I'll be following you. You'll hear somebody knocking on your door. It'll be me. So go on and get an extra chair for me to just to sit back and watch you get after it. HBCU Go TV. Y'all got the right person. Again, thank you, Charlie, for this afternoon.
All right, Johnny. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, man, that was Charlie Neal, legendary broadcaster, brought Black college athletics into your house. We can't say enough. I've had an opportunity to give him his flowers while he's still getting after it. I'd like to thank you guys for continuing to follow me. I know for the summer I kind of been off, but I'm back on it. And if you feel yourself at the end of the rope, tie a knot, hold on tight, because ain't nobody bad like you.
My name is JM&E, and I won $500 on the lunch money from the Keeping Up with the Joneses Bracket Challenge.
It's Sybil Wilkes with what you need to know. Today is Monday, August 21st, 2023. Number 1. Hillary, once a Category 4 hurricane as it chugged through the Pacific Ocean, was downgraded before it made land near California Sunday. Authorities also worked over the weekend to move homeless residents or the unhoused in the communities, especially those who camp near rivers, creeks, or other waterways. Even as a tropical storm, the greatest effects of Hillary will be heavy rainfall in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, parts of Arizona, and New Mexico, with expected totals of 10 inches or more of rain in mountainous areas. Number 2. Political observers are going over the latest 41-count, 98-page indictment that was announced 1 week ago, in which Donald John Trump and 18 others were charged with felony racketeering, forgery, and numerous conspiracy actions. There's intrigue about Georgia's Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis's use of racketeering charges in the indictment, and people are also looking at the facility where all 19 of the indicted must turn themselves in by Friday, August 25th. The Fulton County Prison is described as one of the most scandalous institutions in the country. Number 3, there are numerous benefits to walking. It makes you feel good, and a nice walk can improve your health. According to a 2022 study in sports medicine, a 2-minute walk after a meal can also lower your blood sugar. The study showed that a quick walk after a meal stabilized insulin levels in participants. Keeping blood sugars from spiking is good for the body, as large spikes and fast falls can raise the risk for diabetes and heart disease. Number 4, a viral video shows a man yelling and hurling racial slurs at a black man in what appears to be a road rage incident in the metro Atlanta area. In the 56-second video posted on X, also known as Twitter, the man wearing a gray work shirt and backward cap approaches the black man's window at a freeway exit in an Atlanta suburb. The driver remained in his car and stopped recording as the shirtless man backed away from the car. He has not been identified. Number 5, mercy is the compassionate treatment of those in distress, especially when it is within one's power to punish or harm them. The biblical definition of mercy is forgiveness or withholding punishment. For example, God the Father showed mercy on us when he sacrificed his Son, Christ Jesus, on the cross to pay the price for our sins. Read more about mercy in today's newsletter. Here's your daily inspiration from Yogi's Jewels. You can have inner peace when you truly love yourself and work on your betterment. Okay, I'll get to it. Join me today live on YouTube and Facebook at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central with social justice activist Coy Malone, Huggy Lowdown, and Chris Paul, comedians, as we discuss today's top headlines and more. Barbara Scotia College and HBCU in Concord, North Carolina needs our help. The What You Need to Know team is asking for our supporters, alumni, and friends of Barbara Scotia to help them meet their immediate and pressing needs by donating to help Barbara Scotia rise. Please join the thousands of donors from around the world who are stepping up to save one of the nation's oldest HBCUs. Please visit SybilWilkes.com for more information. And check out Black filmmakers rooted in HBCU culture at HBCU First Look. It happens November 10th through the 12th at Howard University. Visit HBCUFirstLook.com for more information. Thank you to our What You Need to Know partners, the American Heart Association and Black Health Matters. To subscribe to my free daily newsletter, please visit SybilWilkes.com. Be informed, be empowered.
BS3 Network, changing the way you watch TV.